With Catherine beside him, our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations.
For decades, King Charles has faced storms, scandals, intense scrutiny, and the weight of everyone's expectations. But this time, things feel different. A shocking statement from Prince William and Kate Middleton has grabbed the headlines, not so much for what was said, but for the shift in power it seems to be causing. King Charles is on edge as questions swirl around the nation. Is his reign already over? Is he the true King of Britain, or is he just a placeholder until the future monarchs step in? As tensions rise, the royal family faces a huge decision that could change the monarchy forever. King Charles has always been known for his calm, collected demeanor, with his emotions carefully hidden behind years of royal training. But something's different about him now. It's not in what he says, but in what he leaves unsaid. It's not in his actions, but in the things he deliberately avoids doing. And right at the center of it all is Kate Middleton. The tension didn't come from a single event, but from a series of small, almost unnoticed moments that rubbed people the wrong way. The public first picked up on it during the Commonwealth Day service, a formal event full of tradition where every move is planned to perfection. When King Charles greeted his son, Prince William, he did so with warmth, a rare display of affection that felt intentional. But when he turned to Kate, the mood shifted. There was no embrace, no lingering touch on her arm, just a polite smile, distant and rehearsed. For anyone else, it might have seemed like nothing, but this was Kate, the Princess of Wales, the woman the public had embraced as the future queen. The gap between her and the king, though subtle, spoke volumes. Then came the message, or rather, the lack of one. On International Women's Day, the royal family shared a tribute to influential women like Queen Elizabeth, Queen Camilla, Princess Anne, and the Duchess of Edinburgh. But Kate Middleton's name was missing. Social media exploded in reaction. "Where's Kate?" one user asked. "The Princess of Wales doesn't exist anymore," another joked. The omission wasn't just strange, it was deafening. Kate, the most visible woman in the monarchy, was simply absent. The palace stayed silent, as it always does during moments of speculation. But silence only fuels the fire, and theories started flying. Was it a mistake, an accidental oversight, or was it a message, left unspoken but meant to be understood by those paying attention? Since stepping into her role as Princess of Wales, Kate has become more than just Prince William's poised wife. She's grown into a symbol of strength and dignity, a woman the public trusts. And trust can be a dangerous thing in the monarchy, where power isn't just about bloodline, but perception. The British public had never fully accepted Camilla, no matter how much time passed. For many, the shadow of Diana was too strong, her legacy too powerful. Then came Kate, graceful, composed, and effortlessly stepping into a role once held by the beloved Princess of Wales. The comparisons were inevitable. Some even whispered that Kate was fulfilling the destiny that had once belonged to Diana. In recent months, Kate and William's popularity has skyrocketed. They've become the face of a new modern monarchy. Polls show them consistently ranking higher than King Charles and Queen Camilla. They're the ones the public looks to, the ones who seem to represent the future. And that's become a problem. The monarchy has always survived on a delicate balance of power. It's a machine that runs best when every part knows its role. But what happens when one part starts to outshine the others? When Kate's cancer diagnosis went public, it only deepened the divide. King Charles was quick to express his support, calling her his beloved daughter-in-law, sharing that he was facing the same challenge. Kate, too, offered support in return. The public was expected to rally behind both of them in these tough times, but the reaction revealed something the monarchy had always feared: a shift in loyalty. People were rallying around Kate, and Kate alone. Their sympathy, concern, and unwavering support were all directed at her. In that moment, she became the heart of the royal family. And as history has shown, the monarchy doesn't like competing hearts. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe the cold greeting, the missing tribute, the widening gap between Kate and Charles were all just coincidences. But in the royal family, very little happens by accident. Every gesture, every omission, every carefully crafted statement, or lack of one, carries meaning. So, it had to be addressed. And that's exactly what Kate and Prince William set out to do, the unexpected confrontation. The moment had been coming for a while, slowly but surely, like a storm gathering in the distance. Standing before the cameras, William and Kate weren't just here to perform another royal duty. This was different. Their faces were serious, their words carefully chosen. It wasn't just about the simmering tension between him and Kate Middleton since the death of Queen Elizabeth. That had been manageable. But the cold greeting, the missing tribute, and the way Charles seemed to sidestep Kate in ways that couldn't be passed off as mere coincidence? The public had noticed. Of course, the whispers had gotten louder, and the speculation harder to ignore. But William had said nothing, until now. The confrontation had been subtle, almost unspoken. But those who were present knew exactly what had happened. It began with a look, a flicker of something in William's eyes as his father once again overlooked Kate, barely acknowledging her presence at an official gathering. A moment later, William turned to his wife, his hand resting lightly on hers. It was a quiet statement, but unmistakable. He had noticed, and he wasn't going to let it slide. What came next wasn't loud. There were no raised voices, no dramatic gestures. That's not how things are done in the royal family. But it was tense. A few private words exchanged, sharp enough that those nearby could feel the weight of them. Charles dismissed it at first, brushing past William's concern with the same cold detachment he had shown towards Kate. And just when he thought the matter had been settled, they stepped forward. William and Kate's announcement was brief, but it didn't need to be long to send shockwaves through Buckingham Palace. Those closest to the royal family understood immediately what had just happened. William and Kate weren't just affirming their commitment to their roles. They were making it clear they intended to shape the future of the monarchy in their own way. And Charles trembled. The irony was impossible to ignore. For years, Charles had watched as his own mother held on to power, keeping him at arm's length from the throne. Now, in an entirely different way, it was happening again. The monarchy was shifting beneath him, and he wasn't the one steering it. But there was another layer to this, one that had been quietly lurking since the day Queen Elizabeth's will was read. That day had been strange enough. The family had gathered at Buckingham Palace, tense with anticipation. Then, instead of Charles, it was Prince Andrew who stepped forward to read their mother's final words. No one had seen it coming. Charles had remained silent as his brother read the will, but those who were in the room noticed how his hands tightened in his lap. Then came the real shock. The Queen's will had not gone as expected. Certain estates, certain titles, things that should have gone straight to Charles, were instead spread around in unexpected ways. Sandringham went to Anne, Balmoral was to be shared among the family, and even Kate was named directly, receiving the historic Vladimir tiara, a royal symbol of grace. It was a sign of approval, a message that, in the Queen's eyes, Kate wasn't just a supporting figure in the monarchy, but a pillar of it. Charles kept his composure, not protesting, but anyone who knew him well could see the stiffness in his posture, the tightness of his smile. This was not the smooth transition he had imagined. Months later, William and Kate were making it clear they had their own path, particularly when it came to their son, Prince George. Charles couldn't simply wield his power as king and take what he felt was his, or force everyone else to fall back into place. William wasn't just any prince. He was the direct heir, the future king. And Kate wasn't just any princess. She was the woman the public adored, the future queen consort who had earned trust in a way few others had. And Charles? He was just Charles, king by birthright, but in the hearts of the people, little more than a placeholder. For years, Charles had known his reign would be shorter than his mother's. What he hadn't anticipated was how quickly his influence might start to fade. As he watched his son and daughter-in-law step forward to assert themselves, he felt an undeniable tremor. When they spoke up, both Charles and the monarchy felt it, deep and heavy. William and Kate didn't care about the slights, the cold smiles, or the lack of praise. They knew it would all fade when they were finally on the throne. But there was one thing they wouldn't back down on: their children, especially Prince George. The young boy, second in line to the throne, had already been exposed to the heavy weight of royal expectations. Charles' coronation had proven that. While some marveled at George's dignity standing beside his grandfather, others saw the echo of the past in his solemn gaze, remembering a young William decades ago, walking behind his mother's coffin, thrust into the public eye long before he could understand what had been taken from him. That boy had been William, and now history was threatening to repeat itself. The statement made by Prince William and Kate was nothing short of a bombshell, both a bold declaration and a clear warning. They had experienced the pressures of royal life firsthand, watching as the strict traditions of the monarchy turned their own childhoods into public spectacles. Their innocence, something that every child should be entitled to, had been slowly stripped away as they were thrust into the spotlight. Witnessing the toll this took on their own lives, they were determined not to let it happen to their son, Prince George. This firm stance they took on his future may also explain the growing tension between King Charles and Kate. The king might have believed that Kate had somehow influenced William's perspective, as William's words were resolute and unwavering. He wasn't just speaking as a father, but as a prince determined to chart his own course. They would not let Prince George be molded into the same rigid, suffocating role they had been forced into. Though George's position in the monarchy was inevitable, his role would not be defined by outdated traditions or the crushing weight of a crown that had broken many before him. It would be shaped by the values and vision William and Kate had for their family. For the public, it had always seemed that George's path was set. They assumed he would follow in his father's footsteps with no room for change or deviation, that he would be groomed for the throne from the moment he could walk, just like his father and grandfather before him. But with this statement, everything shifted. The idea of George being trained for a life of strict royal expectations was no longer a given. "We're done," William and Kate essentially declared after laying down their conditions. Prince George's role in the monarchy would no longer be determined solely by the crown's needs. From this point forward, if Charles wanted George to participate in any formal events, he would have to get permission from William and Kate first. They would no longer be subjects to orders from the throne. It was a clear line drawn in the sand. They would not back down. If Charles attempted to bypass them in any way, the consequences would be dire. King Charles, while maintaining a composed exterior after the discussion, could not hide the subtle signs of tension. His fingers tightened slightly on the armrest of his chair, his breaths shallow but tight. It wasn't just about George's participation, it was about control, and that control was slipping away. For years, Charles had struggled to assert his authority, fighting to carve out his own vision for the monarchy, while trying to step out from under the long shadow of his mother. Now, just as he had begun to settle into his reign, his own son was beginning to create his own vision for the future of the royal family. Charles inhaled deeply, trying to calm the tremor in his hands, knowing that reacting now would be a mistake, not in front of so many eyes. But once he was behind closed doors, the full weight of his son's words hit him like a ton of bricks. The monarchy was under attack from all sides. There were too many challenges, too many pressures pushing down all at once. Charles had faced internal struggles for decades, from his tumultuous marriage to Princess Diana to his ongoing battle to define his reign while constantly being compared to his mother. But this was different. This was about the future of the throne itself. The monarchy, the very institution he had spent a lifetime preparing for, was in a state of flux. And to make matters worse, Kate Middleton's sudden absence from public life raised even more questions. Whispers about her health began circulating, and when she revealed that she had been diagnosed with cancer, it sent shockwaves through the nation. The public, who had always admired Kate for her grace under pressure, now watched as she faced one of the greatest challenges of her life. Yet even as she battled this illness, she never fully stepped away from her royal duties. At the same time, Charles was also dealing with health struggles of his own, though he continued to fulfill his royal responsibilities. The question, though, loomed large. How much longer could he keep up the physical and emotional demands of the role? The weight of the crown felt heavier than ever, especially now that both he and Kate were facing health challenges. The future of the monarchy seemed to rest increasingly on William's shoulders. Perhaps this is why William and Kate had made their statement about George now. Perhaps it wasn't just about shielding their son from the pressures of royal life, but about ensuring the monarchy itself could evolve in a way that reflected the changing world around it. With their firm stance, they were not only protecting their son's future, but also redefining the monarchy's future. William and Kate had seen firsthand how rigid tradition could be, and how it could break those unprepared for its weight. The last thing they wanted was for George to get trapped in the same cycle. But their stance raised concerns. If George's role was to be redefined, what would that mean for the monarchy? Behind palace doors, heated discussions were underway. Some royal advisors thought the statement was necessary, an approach to keep the monarchy relevant in a changing world. Others saw it as a dangerous move that could undermine the very structure that had held the institution together for centuries. Then there was the matter of Kate's relationship with Charles. The public had long believed that Charles and his daughter-in-law shared a close bond, but recent events had cast doubt on that. Some chalked it up to royal protocol, but others weren't so sure. Charles had spent years preparing for this reign, believing that once he took the throne, he would finally have the chance to shape the monarchy in his image. But with William and Kate's growing influence and their clear intent to do things their way, it was becoming evident that his plans might not unfold as he'd hoped. His vision was no longer the only one that mattered. The future of the crown was no longer just about him. Another king in the past might have raged, punished, excluded, or denied any appeal, but Charles knew better. Throwing a tantrum would only make him look frail in the eyes of the British public. Public opinion had never truly been on his side, not when picture-perfect Kate Middleton was on the other side. He had no choice but to show grace, or risk losing whatever dignity he could in his final years as king. The implication was clear. Despite being the rightful king, the man sitting on the throne, Charles III, was already seen as a relic. His reign was already over. This wasn't the time to fight back. It was the time for Charles to smile, to save face, and to keep up appearances. A king or a placeholder. Charles had spent his entire life preparing for the throne, but nothing could have prepared him for the internal struggles he now faced. The weight of history, the burden of expectation, and now, the crumbling of the very foundation he had once thought was secure. His mind raced, caught between the past and the present, trying to make sense of the chaos. Should he fight against the shifting tides, or should he yield, adapting to this unexpected turn? The crown had never been a gift. It had always been a sentence, a duty that had been passed down from the moment of his birth. His arrival into the world had been heralded by royal gun salutes, his future already written long before he could speak his first words. Unlike most children, whose paths are theirs to shape, Charles's destiny had been set in stone when he was named heir to the throne at just 3 years old, the same age his mother, Queen Elizabeth, had ascended to her role. The life he was born into wasn't one of choice, but of duty, a duty that isolated him from the world he would one day rule. His childhood was far from ordinary. While the public marveled at the young prince, a lonely boy grew up behind the palace walls. His mother, the queen, was distant, bound by her duties as monarch, and his father, Prince Philip, was strict and unyielding in his discipline. There was little room for warmth, comfort, or the kind of childhood most would consider normal. But Charles never cried out. He endured silently, as if he had learned that loneliness was just part of his existence. Then, of course, there was the press. From an early age, Charles was under constant scrutiny, every move analyzed, every gesture critiqued. In an interview, he once confessed that he despised being treated like a performing monkey, but there was no escaping the cameras. He was expected to smile, to wave, and to be the prince the public demanded him to be. Even as he grew older, the pressure never relented. His love life, his marriage, his struggles, all of it was laid bare for public consumption. But through it all, Charles waited. 7 decades passed, and finally, his moment arrived. The death of Queen Elizabeth thrust him onto the throne, an ascension both long anticipated and yet, in many ways, deeply uncertain. He had inherited a monarchy that had been irrevocably transformed over time, shaped by the reign of a mother who had been the embodiment of unwavering duty. She was loved, respected, seen as the symbol of stability. Charles, on the other hand, had always struggled with public perception. He was neither as adored nor as unshakable as his mother. And now, barely 2 years into his reign, the cracks were beginning to show. Charles had long known that challenges would come with the throne. He had anticipated the monumental pressures of modernizing the monarchy, the expectation to prove himself worthy of the crown. However, the battle he now found himself facing was one he never could have predicted. His own son and daughter-in-law were at the heart of a storm, one that threatened to unravel the very institution he had inherited. Prince William's firm statement, Kate Middleton's sudden health crisis, and the whispers about the future of the crown, these were not the trials Charles had prepared for. And yet, they were the challenges that had landed at his feet, demanding his attention and action. There was an undeniable and unspoken truth that Charles could not ignore. William and Kate's popularity had long surpassed his own. The public adored them, seeing in them a bright, fresh future for the monarchy, one that was stable, reassuring, and modern. In contrast, Charles still carried the heavy baggage of past scandals, the lingering shadows of public doubts about his reign. Despite being king, his rule seemed less like the start of a new era and more like a transitional period, a brief interlude before the inevitable passing of the torch. With each passing day, especially as William stepped forward to take a more active role, Charles couldn't help but wonder, was he being overshadowed in his own reign, in the very institution he had worked his whole life to lead? As these thoughts swirled in his mind, memories from his past began to surface, images of his lonely childhood, the rigid expectations placed upon him, and the profound sense that he had never truly fit in with those around him. From a young age, he had always struggled to meet the mold that had been set before him. Now, as he sat on the throne decades later, Charles found himself questioning whether he had ever really found his place, whether he had ever truly been the person he was meant to be. The crown was his, yes, but was it his to rule in the traditional sense? Or was it simply a temporary seat, a placeholder for the next generation? Was his role to reign, or was it to prepare the way for his son, to pass on the burden of monarchy? The weight of history seemed to press down on him, the echoes of past monarchs who had faced their own moments of crisis. Some had clung fiercely to their power, refusing to yield, while others had adapted to the shifting tides of time. Charles had spent his entire life preparing for this moment, for the moment when he would finally ascend to the throne. But as he sat there, surrounded by the storm both outside Buckingham Palace and within himself, he found himself asking a difficult question. Had he ever truly asked himself what kind of king he wanted to be? Had he fully considered the kind of legacy he wished to leave behind? With the world watching, waiting for his next move, Charles had to make a choice. Would he fight against the rising forces that seemed intent on overshadowing him? Would he cling to the throne and assert his reign, holding firm to the traditions and expectations of the past? Or would he embrace the changing landscape of the monarchy, adapting to the evolving world and the challenges that came with it? Only time would reveal which path Charles would choose, but in the silence of Buckingham Palace, as the storm raged on, one thing was clear. His decision would define not just his reign, but the future of the monarchy itself.